This is the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Hello, hi, hello, and welcome to the High Stakes. Whoops, sorry about that. It's way too much shows this week. I am Eric Balkman from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, which is what you're watching right now. You also know me from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and of course the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network and the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Tonight we are going back to back in RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Had a great show with Craig Mastro last night. He of the fifth place team in the Week 5 Fantasy Pros Championship. Great to catch up with him. And tonight we're going to catch up on with another guest that we haven't had on in many years, which I'm excited for. If you are looking for some action in the FFPC this week, go ahead and dial up myffpc.com, myffpc.com to play in the weekly challenge. You can enter for as little as $35, win up to $2,500. You build your 10-person lineup or 12-person lineup if you want to play with kickers and defenses any way you want. You just can't have two players on the same team. It's the same format as our world-famous FFPC Playoff Challenge, but there is no draft. There is no salary cap. You just lock those lineups up and watch them roll throughout the weekend. You can play in the Thursday challenge, which includes the Thursday game, or the Sunday challenge, which will obviously not include the Thursday game. myffpc.com is where to go for that, myffpc.com. Let's bring in tonight's guest, ladies and gentlemen, a guy who's had a lot of success in his career with the FFPC. I believe has a top 60 team in the Fantasy Pros Championship right now, and a guy who's already got 5 high-stakes titles, league titles under his belt. Please welcome onto the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the incomparable Rick Kaufmann. Rick, how's it going tonight, man?
Hey, going well.
I know you said we were emailing back and forth, and you're like, it's too bad my team had a bad week this past week. But the ebbs and flows of the season, man, you could be back up into the top 5 after this week. You never know.
Yeah. It's we were top 10 the last 2 weeks, and then this week, that injury bug reached up and got us. So,
Which it happens, right? Like there's just we all got to deal with it at some point. I made the mistake of drafting injured players that were already hurt coming into the season. I'm paying the price for that one, which I never should have done. But it's fantasy, and this is what happens. I want to throw something out here at the top of the show that's not on the rundown, and I didn't plan on asking this, but I also did not plan on the Cleveland Browns trading Amari Cooper to the Buffalo Bills. We saw 3 trades today. We'll talk about the Adams one in a little while, and then obviously the Akers trade going from Houston to Minnesota. But you look at this Amari Cooper trade, he is now a Buffalo Bill. Obviously, you're going to keep starting him. The sky's the limit for Cooper. How much better is he going to be in Buffalo than he was with Cleveland?
The only thing I'm a little worried about is the targets. Amount of targets. As you saw, that 2 games ago, he was targeted at over 10 times. And in Cleveland with Watson. So Watson was trying to force the ball into him sometimes, unsuccessfully. But that's the only thing I'm worried about. I think he's going to be the number 1 receiver in Buffalo. Kincaid should also be racking up some targets. I think the other guys are going to take a step back. So I like it. I've got him in a couple of leagues, so I'm excited about it. I think it's going to take a week or 2 to get going. So I'm not exactly sure about week 7 here, but I think after that, we'll be looking at a good connection.
That's what I was going to ask you. If we find out he's active in week 7 and the Bills play, they're on the short week this week, obviously. But Buffalo is at home against the Titans on Sunday at 1:00. If we find out Cooper's active, how comfortable would you be playing him right away?
I would probably not be too comfortable depending on who my other receivers are or
Right.
flex players are. I want to to see it with a bunch of players that are coming back. I mean, Chubb and things like that. We can get into all those players, but I'd like to see a little bit of what's going to happen. I think the first week's going to be slow. I do like him week 8 after. I know they got the bye coming up as well, but
Yeah.
The first week I'm always leery. I guess I err on the side of caution. So I want to see what I'm going to get. That doesn't mean that he's not going to go off. Allen should try to find him. Allen's always forced the ball to Diggs. I think this is going to be more of a force feed type of situation, but maybe not the first week.
What do you think about Cleveland now with Jerry Judy, with Amari Cooper, with David Njoku? Either of these guys getting a bump in production enough for you to say, okay, wheels up for Njoku, wheels up for Judy. I could see it for Njoku. I'm struggling a little bit with Judy right now.
Well, he's got to throw the ball to somebody. I mean, right now the whole world's against Watson. He's got to throw the ball to somebody if they're going to keep running him out there. I don't think they should be, but Stefanski thinks that that's what they need to do. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen with Chubb.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that if he's healthy, I think they'll be giving him the ball. So it's going to kind of hurt the other backfield mates when that comes to that. But they got to throw the ball to somebody. So more. I like Judy's presence there with Watson, or if they replace him. So I think that Njoku should step up, get a few more targets, but I think Judy's going to pick up several more targets.
Is Elijah? I mean, when the FFPC waiver wire runs tomorrow, are you going to throw any bucks on Elijah Moore to pick him up?
I'm not exactly sure I'm going to do that. Everything just came out here late in the day.
Right.
I haven't looked at it. I'll look at that a little bit more tomorrow. I'm sure he's available in a lot of the leagues. If I do, I won't be spending much on him because I do think the targets are going to go elsewhere. So that is probably once again being very cautious with that. Maybe a few shekels, but I'm not going to go nuts with it.
I think from the standpoint of like, two things have to happen, right? One, the Browns offense has to become a lot better than it has been. And two, Moore has to be part of that. So that's a twofold thing in order for Elijah Moore to come through. And he's taking up not so much what you spend on the waiver wire for him, but he's taking up 5% of your roster, and we're coming into buys, and we're in the buys right now. Yeah. Like each roster spot becomes precious.
And with Watson doing what he's not doing, that makes it even more difficult to put a player from Cleveland out there.
Right. That's very good point. Speaking of Cleveland, they play in the same division as the Baltimore Ravens, the team that our next subject plays on. Rashard Bateman. If we look at what he's been able to do so far this season, he's had at least 4 targets every single game except for one when it was a blowout win over Buffalo. So they didn't really have to throw a whole lot that game. But this past week, 4 for 71. The week before, 4 for 58 and a touchdown. 3 for 28 and a touchdown the previous week. 3 for 40, 2 for 53. This guy's been in the thick of it all year. Now, I don't know if the upside is there, but when you're looking for, 10, 12 points or whatever it is at your flex, how likely is Rashard Bateman? I know everybody's different, but how do you feel about Rashard Bateman being a flex for you every week at this point?
I have him in 4 leagues, and I'll probably this week more than any week, I like the matchup because I think Tampa's going to put up some points too. And it's a Monday night game. I really think that he's going to be in play, but on an average week, it's really depends on who's on your roster. I'd rather have a pass catching back in that flex position than Bateman. He's not the number one.
Right.
He's maybe the number 2. And you've got Henry running and Jackson running. If they get a big lead, you're not going to see the points like we saw that on the blowout where he didn't get the targets. So for me, I'm a little skeptical. This week I like him, but after that, it's going to be matchup, and it's going to be based on who else I have on my roster that can fill that spot.
Yeah, it is kind of team dependent a little bit. Are you surprised at all to see how involved he's been in the offense this year in Baltimore?
Um, like as I said, I have him in 4 leagues, so I
Was he a
went out.
target for you in drafting during the drafting
Um,
season?
he kept falling. I didn't reach for him.
Hmm.
In terms of a target, in the lower rounds, yeah, I got him in 15th round or after, and most of the times I drafted him. So I was happy about that. I haven't played him every week. I have played him on. I think I played him. Like I said, I have him in 4 leagues. I've probably played him in 3 of the 6 weeks.
Hmm.
So he's there. Like I said, so it's as far as the target goes, he was there. I took him, and going forward, it's going to be matchup dependent.
I think regarding Bateman too, you kind of know what you're getting into, right? And I think it kind of depends upon what type of fantasy player you are. Are you more risk adverse? Are you more like, hey, I got to get something here? Well, I think that's Bateman this year. Where in previous years he's been kind of like hit or miss, like if he makes a big play or not, and that's only if he was healthy.
Well, I was saying he
But
can't stay healthy. Yeah,
yeah, that's the thing is he has to be on the field in order to make it happen, and he's been making it happen so far this year. So we'll see what
I think
happens
it.
with Bateman.
Yeah, it also who they're playing. I mean, what defensive backs matching up with them? Because if Flowers is the number one, and if they're playing a team that has a quality defensive back, a shutdown corner,
Mhm.
that guy's going to shadow Flowers. Well, now Bateman becomes much more interesting and much more allowable to be in that position because he's going to maybe get a few more targets.
Baltimore is at Tampa as one of two Monday night games in Week 7. 8:15, I believe that's an 8:15 start. Yeah, 8:15 start for Baltimore, Tampa Bay, 9 o'clock start for the Chargers in Arizona for the Monday night double dip. Rick, how do you feel about those two games on Monday nights? I have a love hate relationship with it.
You know what? I like it. I mean, we've had what the first. This will be week seven.
Mhm.
3 of the first 7 weeks have been double Monday nights. I like it. Um, I enjoy it because I enjoy football in general.
Right.
So the more games so we can get, I really like. I'm not crazy about the 8:30 morning games on Sunday,
No.
but I'd rather have the 2 Monday night games. But I was having my buddy was over last night. We were watching the game last night. We were having the same discussion, and we both thought that it was a good idea. I'd like to see it a few more times. Not every Monday, but if they do it, 4 or 5 times a year, I think that's good.
The only problem I have with it is waiting on questionable players, right? Where I have to make a decision on Sunday about, okay, am I going to play this guy here just to get somebody, or am I going to wait around and hopefully this guy plays Monday? That's my only issue with it. I'm with you. I
Yeah.
like having two games on Monday night. I wish they would overlap less, but I think what ABC and ESPN are trying to do is they're trying to get the whole find out who's watching what channel when. So they tend to put them kind of in the same
Yeah.
window. But I'd love to see the second game start up just as the first game's going to halftime. That would be my
Yeah.
perfect one.
I agree. I mean, your example last night, Cooks. They
Yeah.
announced Cooks was inactive.
Yep.
And I was able to pivot because I had him in my flex. I was able to put Lazard in 1 week, and
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he almost pulled through. I was didn't. I think I got beat. I ended up getting beat by 2 points, so I needed
Uh,
another catch. But
I had Cook in 3 leagues, and 2 of them I didn't have any. I just felt like he was going to play. I wasn't seeing anything that
all
you
the
know.
reports, yeah.
Yeah, it was all positive. I got Braylon Allen in for one of them, but the other two I had to take the zero. Such as fantasy, but I won't be making that mistake again. Learning a lot of hard lessons this year. It's been
Yeah.
unfortunate so far. Christian Watson for my Green Bay Packers. His talent alone is unbelievable. The issue with him is knowing when you can play him because he is kind of a hit or miss type guy. Not only because of the skill set that he has, but because of how the Packers offense is used and how talented that everybody is on that team. I was talking with Nelson Sousa on the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show earlier tonight. He actually talked me into Christian Watson, saying, like, I love to play guys with upside. I love to play the ceiling guys. So that's why I love Watson here. And I get it. Like if Watson's big, he's going to be really big. It's just a matter of stomaching like the 2 for 10 game or the 3 for 30 game where it's just there's nothing there. But when you look at what Christian Watson's talent is that enough? Is that upside enough for you to say, like, hey, I gotta find a way to wedge this guy into my lineup every week?
If you remember back 2 years ago when he was a rookie,
Mm-hmm.
not that well, 3 years ago, I guess, when he was rookie, he had Jalen Reed's position, so he was running those sweeps, jet sweeps, and things like
Yep.
that. Now Reed is, so I'm a little bit less confident in him. I'll play him when I don't have other options, because, like you said, he's a hit and miss. He's a good ceiling, but his floor is really low. You could have that 2 for 10. I do like what I've seen out of him this last game. I think as Love gets more comfortable, and we get into a game, I think this week's game is going to be great against Houston. It could be a shootout, So I think we'll be putting the ball up in the air. So I do think he has more chances. But when we play a grinded out game and we're using the running game, he's going to have even less targets. So it kind of depends on, who my other receivers are and who my flex guys are. He may get in, if I've got him in 4 leagues, he may get in 2 leagues this week, maybe 3, but once again, matchup dependent.
When I say my Green Bay Packers, should I be saying our Green Bay Packers? Since you're carrying the G as the
well,
kids
we were at
say.
the game. We were at the game on Sunday, so
right. Yeah, and I felt bad because I ended up going to it was weird because I didn't plan on going to the game. I sold my tickets, and then I had a buddy who called me whose friend had free club seats. So at like 10 o'clock, and I'm like, all right, well, we can't turn down club seats. We got to go. So then we just drove up from Appleton to Green Bay, and the traffic wasn't too bad. So we ended up watching the game, and that was exciting. I mean, that was a fun game to watch. Jordan Love looks every bit of what I think a lot of people thought he was going to be. And I was impressed with the Packers defense too. They really did a good job shutting down. Now Harrison got hurt, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I wonder if that affected the way that Arizona was forced to try to move the football down the field. We'll get into that in a little bit. Before we do that, I want to go back to Darnell Mooney here. Not go back to him, but go to him. He was running white hot 3 out of the last 4 weeks. For sure 2 out of the last 3. Then he gets the clunker in Carolina. Now, I don't know if that's a case where they just really didn't need to be tossing the ball around the field because it was the Panthers. I don't know what happened there. He gets the Seahawks this week. I think it's the highest point total in Vegas of any NFL game this week. Do we need to find out, or do we need to find a way to get Mooney in our lineups? Is he going to be back to having a massive game rather than what he put up against the Panthers?
I like him this week. I was one of the guys. I have him. When we talked about targets earlier with Bateman, I had Mooney as a target, and I grabbed him in a lot of leagues. But I was the guy that had him sitting on the bench in every league but one 2 Sundays ago, and along with Higgins in one of my leagues. So it's who do you have, in front of him? But I put him in every league I had. He played for me this week, which was, somewhat disappointing, obviously. But I like it. This matchup, highest point total. I think they're going to be chucking it. Seattle's been putting up points and passing yards. So, Atlanta's going to have to keep up with them. And, he's, they've got that 3-headed monster. I'm not really going to include Pitts in that yet, but Ray McLeod, he's coming along. He's a dark horse too that you could put in there. But London and Mooney, I think that they're outstanding. I think he'll have down games, but I think he can definitely be a good 3 receiver.
That Atlanta offense in general. I mean, Algier and Robinson, that backfield combo, and you throw Pitts in there with McLeod and London and Mooney and Kirk Cousins. Like, that is a really fun offense. And I think what we saw in that 500-yard game, we're finally seeing, like, okay, this is kind of what we signed up for when we were drafting Falcons. When you were drafting Mooney, was it sort of the same reason that you got Bateman on a handful of teams, was because he just kept falling to you?
I had him rated higher than Bateman, so I was grabbing him, more around the 13, 14, which was probably higher than people were putting, because he was real low in ADP. So I maybe reached a round or 2 higher than his ADP to get him. I liked him. I stayed away from Pitts because he just has never done anything for me, and I've been burned by him. I couldn't get London at where he was going. But I knew I wanted to have pieces of the Atlanta offense. And, before we started drafting, that was one of the guys I had. And I got him in, like I said, I think I have him in 6 leagues. So.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Mooney was a guy too. I honestly stopped drafting him because I kept getting him in a lot of spots. And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm overvaluing this guy. Like maybe I'm too high on him. And then now I'm kind of like, man, I should have kept drafting him because he was super cheap. I mean, you didn't have to pay a ton to get him in drafts. You can get him pretty affordably.
Yep.
Moving on to Cleveland here, or moving back to Cleveland, I should say, after we talked about that Cooper trade. Kevin Stefanski said Jerome Ford is going to be week to week with a hamstring injury. And we also saw a separate report that Nick Chubb is expected to make his season debut week 7 against the Bengals. Now, if Chubb is active, what do we do? Are we simply closing our eyes and clicking yes, start on Nick Chubb? Is it more nuanced than that? Do we look at Deontay Foreman? Do we look at Pierre Strong? Because I'm assuming if a guy is listed as week to week, as Stefanski listed Ford, he's not playing this week. And then it comes down to a dude who hasn't played all season, or Foreman or Strong. And I don't really know which way I'm going on this. How would you be treating this?
I have Chubb in my dynasty league, or one of my dynasty leagues. I have him. I've drafted him in 2 other leagues. Once again, getting him at what I consider value. Depending on, I have 2 other running backs on that team that are questionable. If they're good to go, then Chubb, I will not be playing Chubb this week. If they are going to continue to sit out, then Chubb may find his way into my roster as a running back. I like him. I don't think anybody else in the running back situation in Cleveland is worth playing. And matter of fact, I think most of them are worth dropping unless there's another injury that comes up. But I think Chubb's going to be the guy going forward. This first week, though, I think it's going to be, let's see what his usage is, his snap counts and stuff like that, and what type of are they going to ride him? They did it when he was healthy before, the last couple of years before he got hurt. So now the question is how heavy is his usage going to be? I don't think this first week, they're going to probably try to, maybe have a 40-60 between him and the 2 other guys that are there, Foreman. But once again, this first week, it's questionable is what you do. After this, he's in my lineup probably every week.
Yeah, I mean, it should clear up, right? Especially if we see heavy usage, like if Chubb touches the ball 15 plus times, then yeah, we're going to feel really good about him in week 8. Yep. The Foreman and Strong thing is interesting because if Ford is hurt, you'd like to keep the guy who could be the starter on if Chubb isn't ready to go. Foreman or Strong, you would think, is going to get the start. So I'd like to keep him around if I could. But then you have to consider the whole, okay, if Chubb is not active, is it just a split between Foreman and Strong? And then if it's a split, I don't know if I want any part of that, right? And if I don't want any part of that split, what am I doing keeping either of these guys around for? Like it might just be Ford and Chubb cut ties with everybody else at this point.
Right. It depends on your roster size. 15 roster, 16 roster, you're not going to do that. But if you got 20, like you would do in the FFPC, then, you can afford to maybe have them on and wait the week or 2 to see, which one's going to get that. But I like I said, I'm not on any. Even when Ford comes back, you just have him as a handcuff.
Yeah. And we may have seen the best of Jerome Ford for 2024 as well. And it just may not be a good situation because Cleveland's offense has to do something too. Like it's not even enough for one of these guys to get action. Like the Browns offense actually has to pick it up at some point.
For a bad offense, we're talking about them a lot.
It's true. Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because we look at it from a fantasy perspective and we're like, God, just put Winston on the field. Let him pump the ball downfield 40 times a game. Yeah, he's going to throw 2 or 3 picks, but we don't care. We just want to see numbers for Njoku and for Judy and for Moore and for Chubb and all these guys. And it's just the real world doesn't work like that, which is really unfortunate. The Indianapolis Colts had a quarterback thing this past week where it seemed like Anthony Richardson was going to start. And then game time decision, he is not starting. And Joe Flacco made the start. Shane Steichen was talking about his quarterback situation this week. He said, look, when Richardson is healthy, he's our starting quarterback. Okay. Now, if he's healthy this week, I think it hurts the fantasy prospects for the wide receivers on this team. So if Richardson is out there, and I'll bring this up too right now, the Colts this week are playing at home against the Dolphins, who are coming off a bye. If Richardson is starting, would you still be comfortable putting Josh Downs and Michael Pittman in starting lineups, given that they've been a lot better with Joe Flacco than they have been with Richardson?
I think Pittman, yes. Downs, I'd be a little leery on, because we know they're not going to be throwing the ball as much as they did with Flacco. I think another thing too is Taylor coming back. I think if Taylor's back, that's even going to be less. If he's not back, and Miami puts up some points, now Richardson may have to throw. I would put Pittman in. Once again, it depends on who my other receivers are and who my other flex players are.
Mm-hmm.
Downs, I'm a little bit more down on. They haven't played together because Downs came back late when Richardson was hurt. So they only have one game together, I think, that they've played.
Roughly.
And Pierce was getting the deep shots. So with that, for me, Pittman may be in play. I'm going to have Downs on my bench. Unless of course I'm forced to, but there's only 2 bye games this week. So, short of injuries, you should have plenty enough players, or you could put somebody else in, I would think.
We got a question from the Bink King in YouTube. The Rams are coming off a bye as well. How do you guys feel about Cooper Kupp this week before everyone is on him week 8, especially for DFS? So I'll answer this from an FFPC point of view. I think if Kupp is active, I'll put his question back up. I think if Kupp is active, I am playing him this week. The amount of weeks we have to play these studly players are few and far between. And I'd hate to waste a healthy Kupp week just because I want to see what he does in his first week back. I already know that they want to run the whole offense around him, and that he is going to be heavily targeted by Matthew Stafford. No Puka Nacua as well. So he is the guy in this offense. I think that if I have him on my roster, I'm going to be hard-pressed to find 3 or 4 better options than him at receiver. He's going to be in all my lineups if he's active. Rick, how do you feel about it?
100% agree with you that if, it's a different story than what we were talking about with some of the other guys on, being careful and watching them and see how they do. They're changing teams, they're changing systems, they're coming back off of a major injury. As you said, they run the offense around Kupp. Stafford's healthy, and that's what they tell us. That's been his number 1 receiver, proven time in and time out. 100% he's in my lineup if he's going.
Yeah, it's just we don't want to waste it.
Nope.
There are certain players that I would say take a wait and see approach. I'd love to take a wait and see approach with Nick Chubb this week. I don't know if I'll have that luxury, but I definitely like to do that for sure. I want to bring up, let's see, one thing from. Okay, is there something to be said for this? So Michael Kinzel says Anthony Richardson is in his lineup if he's healthy. He also says he loves Tyler Goodson as a sneaky sleeper pick. If we look at what the Colts did against Tennessee last week, a game that was pretty hotly contested throughout, Trey Sermon, 18 carries, 29 yards. Tyler Goodson, 8 carries, 51 yards. Goodson, 6.5 yards a carry. Trey Sermon, 1.5 yards a carry. Trey Sermon, not targeted in the passing game. Tyler Goodson, 4 catches, 14 yards. For the sake of this question, Rick, let's assume Jonathan Taylor is not ready to come back this week. How do you feel about Goodson as a flex, as one of your flexes on an FFPC team?
I think he's playable. My concern is, Steichen said Sermon was the starter. And, if unless he comes out and tells me that Goodson's going to get, is going to be more in the game plan, you're still looking at they're going to give Sermon the first chance, let's just say. So it's really the game script's got to go the way it went this week for Goodson to he'll get some, but is he going to get enough to be in your flex over other players? And once again, I guess I'm coming back to there's only 2 buys this week, and in week 8 there's no buys. So we're looking at you're going to have most of your full rosters available to you, short of injuries. So with Goodson, I'm a little leery about that, just because if Sermon's still going to get the go, unless Steichen tells us something different, you're looking at him running back 3 or 4. You could get points, you could hit it again, but Sermon had a good week 2 weeks ago, so
right.
a decent week. So once again, how's that game flow going to go?
What's frustrating to us as fantasy owners is like we saw it last week, right? Where now, granted, Tyler Goodson 51 rushing yards, 33 of them were on 1 carry, so really he had 7 for 18. But Trey Sermon, 18 carries and only 29 yards. Like, we want to see Goodson out there more, but it's not up to us. Like, we have to not only guess what players are going to perform, but what players are going to be put into a position to perform as well.
Right.
That's the frustrating thing with Goodson. I have Goodson on like 3 or 4 of my teams. I'm going to try to keep him on my roster. As the waiver bids go on Wednesday night, I hope I can keep him around just to see what happens here. As long as Taylor's out, I think both those guys should be rostered. But I think I'm with you. He's just too risky with only 2 teams on bye. You got to find another way. Another question from Michael here. Hi, Rick. Do we need to see Jonathan Brooks? Jonathan Brooks, will he be a valuable flex starter for Brooks? And now I was just looking at this. It sounds like week 9 is probably going to be when he comes back rather than week 7. But when he does come back, he's coming into a backfield that Chuba Hubbard's been really good in for the majority of the year. And I wonder, this is a kind of a lost season for the Panthers. I wonder how much action Brooks does get when he comes back, given that Carolina's not playing for much and they have a pretty talented guy in front of them right now.
Yeah, I think they're going to give him they're going to give him a chance, and they're going to give him runs and carries. So he'll cut in a little bit to Chuba. But until we get right down to the end of the season, and they're going to start, monkeying around with maybe putting Young back in to give him some experience and see what they got. I would be very leery of it. I think he's probably better earmarked for next year in a dynasty league type of thing if you got him. But I don't think he's going to, by the time we get to the playoffs, I still don't think he's going to be, even 50-50. He's going to, maybe be getting 20 to 30% at the most in that backfield, because Chuba hasn't done anything wrong. My top team, I got Chuba in as one of my starting running backs.
He's a top 10 option for me again this week. I have gone like I've gone like 700 degrees on Jonathan Brooks because I was excited about him last year. Then he tore his ACL and they said, okay, lost season in the NFL in 2024. We'll see in 2025. Then I hear people talking about, hey, he might be ready early in the season. And then I'm kind of excited about it. And then now we're 3 months past where he was supposed to be back 3 months ago. He was supposed to be back doing everything in mid-July, and he's not. He's still not practicing. Now, he could start up pretty quick, but I just think missing, especially for a rookie, missing all those mini camps, missing all of training camp, missing all this time in the season. I just feel like it's just too much for these guys to catch up on and try to be a fantasy factor down the stretch. To your point, if Carolina wants to throw Young in there and then Brooks and just get the young guys some reps, I can see it. I just don't know if I want to trust it for fantasy.
Yeah, and I once again, even if it's week 9, he comes back, he's coming back slow. They're going to give him a few opportunities, but it's not going to like he's going to be a running back 1 for them. I don't believe any time this season, unless Chuba gets hurt. Once again, with barring an injury, Chuba's, he's proven to be the top back there, and I think he'll continue to be as long as he stays healthy. Maybe he'll fall back a little bit. And he'll get some run, but I like Chuba, and I in a redraft league, I'm staying away from him.
Yeah,
I like him in dynasty though. I mean, I think
for sure.
Yeah. So
plus next year he's got that full year coming off the ACL, which we have seen a lot of players have a lot of success with that second year. Tyrone Tracy, this is an interesting one. So Devin Singletary doesn't play in week 5. Tracy comes in and does pretty well. 100 plus, I think it was like 118 rushing yards, something like that. And then this past week, Singletary doesn't play again. And Tracy gets a lot of action again. 17 carries, 50 yards. That's less than 3 yards a carry. That's not what we want. However, he did get into the end zone. And then receiving the ball, 6 catches, 57 yards. I mean, this was a big time. I mean, what are we looking at here? We're looking at 23-point week, something like that. Eric Gray, who started the game for the Giants in week 5 and then fumbled in that game.
In the end zone.
Yeah. He got 3 carries to Tracy's 17. I'm wondering if Singletary gets back this week, if he is on the wrong side of a timeshare. I'm wondering if Tyrone Tracy is the number 1 for the Giants, even when Singletary comes back.
Well, I'm going to sort of take the other side of this.
Okay.
I mean, so, and I'm going to say when Singletary was in, he averaged, almost 13 points, fantasy points a game. And that was with getting 4 points in his last game that he got hurt. So, he's, 19 point, 16 point, he put up some numbers, and, if he comes back and he comes back healthy, I don't think you're going to see either one of those guys be the dominant back. I think they're going to play the hot hand, and you're probably going to go more to a 50-50 type of split for the next couple of weeks.
If that's the case, are both playable from an FFPC lineup standpoint?
If you're looking at
if Singletary and Tracy are both active,
right?
Let's take it one step further. Giants are playing at home against the Eagles this week. Let's say Singletary's active. Obviously it depends on who else is on your team, but are both those guys startable, both Tracy and Singletary this week?
I think in their flex, yes, but not in a running back. You probably got 2 better running backs. And I know in all my leagues, they wouldn't be in my 1 or 2 running back spot. And then I think they could be started. I mean, if you had to, based on injuries, either one of them I would play if in the flex. But once again, that's based on, I'm not going to sit, a Higgins or a Pittman, for instance, to play one of those guys unless Singletary's not back. Then yes, we want that guy in there.
We fire up Tracy then.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think regarding Tracy, this is a guy that was just a receiver a couple of years ago for Purdue or Iowa or whatever it was.
Purdue,
and now he's Purdue, and now he's a running back in the NFL. And I want to get carried away. I want to get carried away with Tyrone Tracy, but I think it's important to understand that it's not like Singletary was bad when he was in there. To your point, and maybe this is just a case where we're kind of rooting for Singletary to maybe take another week to get healthier. No, I'm not rooting for an injury, Rick. Not rooting for injury. I'm just rooting for health here. And then if that's the case, then Tracy's a slam dunk start, for sure, even against Philadelphia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let's get back to what we were talking about before with those Cardinals receivers. So Marvin Harrison gets concussed at Lambeau Field this week. I'd be really surprised if he plays in week 7. We don't really have a good track record of players getting hurt on Sunday and then still being able to play, even though he gets the extra day to get ready on Monday because they play on Monday Night Football. However, what's interesting about this game is it's Monday night, and if you are looking to wait on Marvin Harrison, you probably will have a couple of options. In other words, you could pick up Zay Jones, who just got reinstated. Not reinstated, but he came back from a hamstring injury. He's going to be good to go this week. Greg Dortch is floating around on some FFPC waiver wires as well. And then you also have Michael Wilson, who I think is owned in most leagues, but he could be out there as well. Let's just frame this I'll just frame it this way. If Harrison misses, of those 3 guys I mentioned, Jones, Dortch, and Wilson, which one is the right one to start this week? And I'll give you a 4th option. None of those guys will be good starts at home against the Chargers. Your thoughts?
I like Wilson. I'd start Wilson. I would not start either of the other guys. Jones, I wouldn't start him. I think if you saw this week, we saw it firsthand. McBride targeted 10 times. So he went nuts, and I think that's what you're going to be getting with them. Is they're going to probably target the running backs a little bit more. That's going to be the game plan in terms of some shorter passes. Murray he didn't look good this week. And unfortunately I have him in a couple leagues and that hurt me. But he did not look good. I was expecting even his throws that he was making, anything past 10 yards was off, and he wasn't hitting his receivers. Now, even when Harrison was on the field, he targeted him a couple times, and it wasn't even close. So that makes me a little nervous about starting those other guys. I think Wilson's he'll be the number one. I like McBride. I love McBride, and I love Connors. And I think Connors will come back with a better game than what he did, because he hurt me too. I have him in a couple of leagues. I think he's going to have a much better game, and I like McBride. So that's where I'd go with that.
Yeah, I think McBride is definitely the guy that I'd be most excited about. I think the rest of these, I mean, probably not Zay Jones, but I think Dortch is right. It depends upon what type of fantasy player you are. Do you want to go for broke? Do you want to go for highest ceiling? And then it's Wilson. But if you're just looking for, I just need 8 to 10 points because I'm missing DJ Moore, or I'm missing Keenan Allen, or I'm missing CeeDee Lamb this week, I just need somebody to plug in there. Then Dortch is probably your guy. But yeah, I mean, go for the gusto. Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, those are the guys that are probably going to be the biggest beneficiaries if Harrison does make it. Michael Kinzel posting here on YouTube right now. Sam Darnold or Kyler Murray this week. Who would you rather play? This is an interesting one too. Between those two players, obviously Kyler Murray, we mentioned Monday Night Football. He's at home against the Chargers. Sam Darnold is at home against the Detroit Lions. If you had to pick from those two, Rick, who would it be?
Wow, that's a good one. I have Murray in 3 leagues, in 3 of the big leagues, and God, I want him to do well. But I'll be honest with you, Darnold. How do you not play Darnold? How is he not a top 10 quarterback?
I'm with you. I think he is a top 10 quarterback. I mean, you look at the total in that game on it's a 1:00 kickoff Eastern time with the Lions and the Vikings. That has a total of 50. It's a 2-point favorite, or Vikings are a 2-point favorite coming off a bye. And to your point, I mean, you talked about how rough Kyler Murray looked passing the ball, and he got shut down running too. I think, it's going to be very difficult for me to see Detroit shutting down the Minnesota offense at home. Even if the Vikings don't have Aaron Jones, I just see a much higher upside with Sam Darnold in this game than Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I once again, week to week, based on that, I would, if I had, if I had the two, I probably would start Darnold just based on that fact.
Yeah.
I'm hoping for Murray though, because I don't have much of a choice. I have to play him.
Yeah, he's one of those guys too. Like Kyler Murray, part of the reason I drafted him in the leagues I did was because I love getting these mobile quarterbacks that are able to chew up yards running the football. And I always feel like it gives them a good baseline, right? Because even if they're not doing it with their arm, they should be able to be at least palatable because of what they can do with their legs. And it just wasn't there for Murray at all last week. And that was really frustrating.
And that's what I liked, the credit to the Packer defense, because they held him in check based on that. There were a lot of runs where Murray just ran out of bounds, and that was because they had somebody closing on them, the Packer defense. So, how does the Chargers handle that? It's going to be interesting to see. And that makes me a little nervous with any of these running quarterbacks. But I kind of had that same philosophy when I was drafting quarterbacks, is I waited a little bit to get, Murray, because he wasn't one of the top 4 or 5 off the board. And for most of the season, he's been okay, but now all of a sudden he's throwing up a couple of clunkers, and I'm not excited about this Monday, just simply if Harrison's out. Once again, it takes another weapon off the board from him, but I think they'll design a little better offensive game plan if Harrison's out. Against the Packers, they lost him, relatively early, which maybe caused some panic on their part.
Well, I think there's a few things working against the Cardinals. Obviously, I'm sure Harrison was a big part of the game plan. And when you lose him, that puts you behind the 8 ball, right? I think the other thing that Green Bay's defense did really well against Murray was, number one, they had 0 sacks. They did not sack him once that game. I think we saw a lot of the mush rush where they're just trying to contain him rather than let him make a big play, like a 50-yard rushing touchdown like he had against San Francisco the week before. Right. And the Green Bay has really good speed. They had both Amari Cooper and Quay Walker out there, who are 2 of the faster linebackers in the league that could close in on him. And we saw a lot of big nickel coverage where Evan Williams and Javon Bullard were out there with Xavier McKinney. And when you have those safeties flying around, it's difficult for Kyler Murray to get the edge on those guys. So kudos to the Packers defense. I'm not panicking on Murray, but yeah, we need him to do something here this week, Rick, for sure.
Yes.
Let's talk about this Davante Adams deal that happened this morning. Adams ends up going to the Jets from the Raiders. We could talk about this from any which way you want. When you talk about the Raiders now being able to feature Trey Tucker, Jacoby Myers, and Brock Bowers even more than they were before, I think there's some fantasy winners in that. And then as we see Adams move on to New York, there could be a fantasy loser there. Maybe Garrett Wilson, maybe Tyler Conklin, maybe Alan Lazard, definitely Mike Williams. Who's the biggest fantasy winner? Who's the biggest fantasy loser between the Jets and Raiders in this Davante Adams trade today?
I would say the biggest winner, quite honestly, I believe is Rodgers, because Rodgers is going to get another weapon, and I think that's going to give him, more confidence. He hasn't really lived up to his billing other than the one game that he thinks of himself. And I think having somebody that he's played with before, you may not see it this game because once again, we're talking about, a quick turnaround for Davante to get there. And is he healthy? Because remember, he's got this hamstring. But I think Rodgers is the biggest winner. The receivers for the Raiders, any one of them could be. I think Brock Bowers will pick up a few more targets and stuff like that. But any of the other receivers are obviously they've got to throw the ball someplace, and I think they're going to be coming from behind a lot, so they're going to have to be chucking it in most games. In the near future. The losers, I think it's the rest of the offensive players on the Jets.
For the Jets,
I think Lazard is. I mean, he went probably to a potential drop, and I think it's going to affect Wilson too. I mean, Wilson's going to get his share, but the tight end's going to see less, so Conklin's going to see less targets. Lazard, I mean, he'll maybe get 2 or 3 targets a game now. And Mike Williams, rumors are they're trying to trade him. He may even be inactive at certain points. So, who knows? And even the running backs, Rodgers likes to dump off the ball. So maybe they're not affected. It was nice to see Hall have a good game last night. For a change. I think that had a lot to do with the play calling. So, maybe with the new play caller there, that'll help him out. But overall, from a fantasy standpoint, I think it's going to make the Jets offense much more dynamic. But from a fantasy standpoint, those players are not going to be, they're all going to take a step down with Adams on the field.
Do you think the targets, if I compare Adams to Garrett Wilson, do you think the targets are fairly even between the two, or is there going to be more of a disparity there?
I think as the season in the beginning here, it'll still be Wilson. I think as the season continues and Adams gets more involved, and I'm assuming he's healthy, I think you'll start to see that go from, maybe let's call week 1 and week 2, 70-30 Wilson. I think you're going to eventually see it 50-50 and actually even tilting, 5-6 weeks down the road to Adams being, 60-40 type of thing is what my feeling is.
Yeah. I think that's pretty accurate too. By the way, Rubio chiming in on the YouTube chat, Davante Adams, who crashed Pat McAfee's interview with Aaron Rodgers today, said that his hamstring is good. Amazing. What a flight.
Miraculously.
From the Raiders, from Las Vegas to New York does for a hamstring. It must have been in like a hyperbaric chamber on the flight or something to get all that good oxygen to it. Let's go to your biggest surprise. Okay, I always like this question. I haven't been asking it a lot over the past few years, but I've been starting asking it again. I think it's good. When you look at week 6, now that it's totally behind us, what was your biggest fantasy surprise? What was the thing that either a good surprise or a bad surprise that caught you off guard and you're like, whoa, I did not see that coming?
Well, quite honestly, it was disappointment in the Cowboys. Every Cowboy player other than Aubrey, the kicker, Dak Prescott was absolutely horrible, but then that led to everybody else being bad. So that was my biggest surprise to the downside. And I don't think, for me, it wasn't even close. I was just very disappointed. I have Dak in a few leagues, and the whole offense. I mean, there was nobody. I mean, Ferguson, was down. CeeDee Lamb was down. Tolbert. I mean, the running backs. It was a disaster, and that was the biggest surprise. Even with Mike McCarthy coaching, that still blew me away that they could be that bad.
I'm with you. Like I was expecting a ton of fantasy points there from everybody. Now we got it with Montgomery. We kind of got it with Laporta. He just had the one catch, but it was a big one. But yeah, I mean, like the Cowboys just, oh God, that was tough. Didn't see it coming at all. Which was really frustrating from a fantasy standpoint. And now the Cowboys get the bye this week. Hopefully they can right the ship. Otherwise, things could get nasty in Dallas.
3-0 on the road and 0-3 at home. And they come back, and in week 8, they got San Francisco at San Francisco. So, we'll see. We'll see. I'm on the verge of, I have Dak in 2 big leagues, and I'm on the verge of benching him. So,
yeah,
I'm just so disappointed. I thought I thought they were going to be one of the teams to beat in the NFC, and they've just totally, imploded. And you can't blame it on the defense completely, because the offense isn't doing anything.
And the other thing too is I know Parsons missed a little bit of time. Lawrence is obviously out. I think one of their corners, I think, is missing a lot of time too. So that's been frustrating. But getting back to your Prescott comment, think about how many people drafted Prescott and now are facing decisions like, and maybe they're not even tough decisions. Prescott or Kirk Cousins, Prescott or Geno Smith.
I've got that one. Yep.
Yeah.
The Cousins one.
Prescott or Sam Darnold, Prescott or Baker Mayfield, which I think is it's really interesting. For me, like, and we'll see what happens in week 8. Who did you say they play in week 8, Rick?
San Francisco, I think.
San Francisco. So that's not exactly the greatest game to come back to.
No, at San Francisco,
yeah. If you're the Cowboys, it's bad. And Rubio pointing out that Jerry Jones, he does that radio show in Dallas every week. I haven't listened to it, but apparently it was pretty funny today. We'll see what happens there. Yeah, Deron Bland. Thank you, Rubio. He's been out. Your favorite final question here for you tonight, Rick. Your favorite ad on the FFPC waiver wire. Now, I'll let you answer this in 2 different ways, because I know not a lot of people like to give away who they're bidding on a show that airs live on Tuesday night. You can either tell me who you like adding on the waiver wire, who your big target's going to be, or you can talk about who you think are going to be the most expensive players bought by FFPC players on the waiver wire that runs at 10 p.m. tomorrow night on Wednesday.
There's not a lot out there. I think based on last night's performance, Ray Davis is probably going to be your number one, maybe Sean Tucker. And I think Ray Davis should be the number one guy out there. Not sure how much fab, I will probably be bidding on him. I'm not going to say how much fab I'll be going with, but I think that he'll be the number one guy going. I like a sleeper. If he's not picked up yet, I like Isaac Guerendo. I think you can get him for, less. And I think, he's not going to be maybe in the top 4 or 5 players picked, but I like him. And, you just don't know what's happening in San Francisco. When is CMC coming back, and Mason, how long is he going to be out? If he's going to be out. But Shanahan seems to make running backs go, and he should be the next guy up.
Yeah, Guerendo is. I rostered him in a couple of spots already. I think he might still be out there in a few, but I'm going to be scooping him up there for sure. And Michael Kenzel points out Noah Brown. What about him? A guy who led the Commanders in targets and receiving yards, was it, or catches? I can't remember what it was this past week. And he's an interesting guy too. Again, not that you want to start him right away this week, as Washington plays Carolina, so it shouldn't be a heavy passing game for Jaden Daniels, but a guy that maybe you want to keep around. And Noah Brown, how do you feel about him, Rick?
I'd say out of those receivers, he's, he'd be first up to take. A couple of those guys, any one of those guys can be the second receiver.
McCaffrey,
and who's the other one?
There's Olamide Zaccheaus.
Yeah, Zaccheaus. he's capable of stepping up too. So I like Brown. I would say out of those, he'd be the guy I'd take. But once again, game flow. What are they going to do? You know, he's checking down a lot, and he's throwing those deeper balls to oh geez, what am I?
McCaffrey.
No, not McCaffrey.
Terry McLaurin.
McLaurin.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's
so you're getting that. But yes, Noah Brown definitely will be picked up in a lot of leagues this week.
And De'Ami Brown in week 5 caught the touchdown too, from Jaden Daniels too. So there's a lot of guys.
We just named 5 receivers. Yeah, just named 5 receivers. They're not all going to get the ball.
Yeah, and it might, and to your point, it might be somebody different every single week, which is the risk you run if you pick up Noah Brown or Zacchaeus or De'Ami Brown or Luke McCaffrey or any of these guys, and you still got Zach Ertz there, who, by the way, led the team in receiving yardage last week, 4 catches for 68. So he's there too. Not to mention Austin Eckler. And there's a lot of guys there. There is a lot of guys we've gotten through on this show tonight. My goodness, Rick, we've covered a lot of ground, better part of an hour. So good to catch up with you. I wish you nothing but the best in trying to not only get back up into the top 10, but to win the whole thing this year, bring home that $1 million grand prize. That would certainly be awesome to see. I can't thank you enough for hanging out with me on a Tuesday night and talking a little fantasy football, dude.
I appreciate it. Had a great time as always, and look forward to doing it again sometime in the future.
We'll do it again sometime soon. Exactly. That's the plan. Right. That is the plan. Be good, Rick. We'll talk to you soon.
Go Pack.
Go Pack, go. That is Rick Kaufmann, ladies and gentlemen. 5-time FFPC High-Stakes League champ in the top 60 of the FantasyPros Championship right now, as he is our guest tonight on the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. What a day it has been. I want to remind you to play in the FFPC Weekly Challenge, myffpc.com. Enter for as little as $35, win up to $2,500. No kickers, or you can play with kickers and defenses. You can play without kickers and defenses. There's no draft. There's no salary cap. You just build the team the way you want it. And no stacking, obviously, just one player per team. And you never know. Just watch them ride throughout the week. It might be a great week 7 for you. myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Tonight, in case you missed it, Nelson Sousa and I went at it 2 hours on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Go back and watch that on the BSN or FFPC socials in case you missed it. Last night, Craig Mastro was our guest on the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. You can get that anywhere you get your podcasts, on the RotoViz feed, as well as the FFPC socials. Coming up tomorrow night, we will have a High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Larry Dunn, who I believe is 3rd place overall entering week 6. I got to see where he's at entering week 6. I got to see where he is entering week 7. But Larry Dunn and I he's going to co-host with me tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Eastern time, HSFF Hour. Check it out on all the FFPC socials as well. And then Thursday, Better Sports Network again, High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, Roto Ballers, Corbin Young and I, taking you all the way up through the first quarter of the Thursday night game between the Saints and the Broncos. That is going to go from 7 until 9 p.m. Eastern time. And then Friday night, we will have a show, Farrell Elliott and myself, on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour at 10 p.m. Why all the shows this week? I'm not going to be available for shows next week, so I'm doubling up on them this week to make sure we still get out all that great fantasy content that you are associated with. So thank you to everybody streaming, downloading, listening, watching. Certainly appreciate it. For Rick Kaufmann, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on iTunes under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email, rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and follow us on Twitter at RotoVizRadio. And remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount through the NFL podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.